You're at that time again in SAT season where we're a week before our test and you're looking at yourself and you're thinking you might not be ready. You're looking at every social media you could think of, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, for last minute tips and reminders that'll help improve your score. Today, we're going to be doing just that and covering tips that'll help you go from this to this.
Today, we're going to be covering 12 SAT tips that you need to know for this SAT so that you won't be cooked. Make sure that if these tips help you, you like, comment, and subscribe so that you guys can stay tuned for more videos to come. If you guys enjoy the video, you guys should also make sure to follow our Instagram and TikTok at Teen Tutors, where we post content daily so that you guys can understand what is going on the SAT. Without further ado, let's get into the first question. So, the first tip that we have for you guys is for the English. Make sure to do the vocab and the grammar first. It's really tricky on the English. What will happen is that in the modules, especially the second module, you might run out of time. And so what we recommend is that when you start this module, you do the vocab first. So those are going to be the first 3 to 5 questions, and you get those done first. Once you get those done, what we want you to do is we want you to skip the reading and go straight to the grammar. So what that's going to look like is you can go to question 15 and then click next until the questions are about standard English conventions. Once you get there, you're going to do the rest of those questions and then finish up the test. And then once you're done with all of those, you're going to make sure to go back and finish the reading questions. What this is going to do is it's going to make sure that your brain is warmed up for the reading questions since those are the hardest, but also what it's going to do is make sure that if you run out of time, you run out of time with less questions. Since the reading questions take longer, if you run out of time, but you did it all the way through instead of doing the grammar before the reading, you would run out with less questions if you did the reading last. So with that, what we want you to do is we want to make sure that you use your time efficiently, and as we said, you do the vocab and the grammar first.
The next tip we have for you is to use strike through on reading. Now this is going to be useful for the whole English module, even some of the math, but it's going to be especially useful for questions like vocab questions, which are the hardest to prepare for. So let's take a look at a question, for example. Here we have that some researchers believe that the genes that enable groundhogs and certain other mammals to hibernate through the winter by slowing their breathing and heart rates and lowering their body temperature may be blank in humans, present yet having essentially no effect on our bodily processes. Now let's look at each option one by one in order to effectively answer the question and use strike through to do it. If we look at decisive first, which is the first answer choice, it's saying that the trait may be decisive in humans, but that doesn't match with the definition it gives us at the end, which is present yet having essentially no effect. So we can eliminate that. Next, we look at the second answer choice, lacking, and if it says that the trait is lacking, which means present yet having essentially no effect, although it doesn't directly match in the context of the sentence, it could sometimes work. So we're going to leave it for later. Then we're going to move on to the third answer choice, which is variable. Saying that the trait may be variable in humans makes absolutely no sense in the context of the question, so we could easily just eliminate it and strike through it. And finally, we move on to dormant. Saying that the trait may be dormant in humans matches exactly what the definition gives us at the end of present yet having essentially no effect. So now that we have it between lacking and dormant, we just choose the one that works better, which is dormant, since lacking was like iffy, and it gives us the answer of D.
So the next tip we have for you guys is on the grammar. What you need to do for a lot of these questions is you need to identify the subject. So what does that mean? Well, let's take a look at one of these questions. So in this question we have the artistic silence of Barbara Chase Rabaud, most known for her 1979 historical novel Sally Hemings and the conversation it inspired, blank, limited to the realm of prose. So what we need to ask ourselves is, what is the subject? Who is the subject? Well, the subject is the artistic talents. That is plural. The artistic talents is they. So what we can do is we can use what's called the it-they test. So since we found that the subject is plural, what we're going to do is we're going to plug in the word they into all of these answer choices and see which one makes sense. So let's read them. So first we have they hasn't been. That wouldn't make sense, so we can strike through that. Then we would have they wasn't. That also wouldn't make sense, so we can strike through that. Then we have they isn't. Again, that wouldn't make sense, so we can strike through that. Finally, we have they aren't. That does make sense. So what we can do is we can say that our answer is they aren't. So our answer is going to be D.
The next tip we have for you guys is to highlight the claim. Now this is going to be useful in the English section for questions that give you an opinionated text that includes some type of claim or conclusion. And then you're going to be asked to use evidence from a graph or a quote or something like that to either weaken or support the claim. So let's take a look at a question and see why it's useful to highlight the claim. Here we have that a student is examining a long, challenging poem that was initially published in a quarterly journal without explanatory notes, then later republished in a standalone volume containing only that poem and accompanying explanatory notes written by the poet. The student asserts that the explanatory notes were included in the republication primarily as a marketing device to help sell the standalone volume. Well, the question says that which statement, if true, would most directly support the student's claim? Well, what we know by reading this question is that the only thing that's important is the claim, right? So we're going to highlight the claim. By doing that, it makes it easier to focus on the important parts of the text, and it makes it easier to ignore the first sentence, which just gives us context. Now we'll go through the options. A says the text of the poem as published in the quarterly journal is not identical to the text of the poem published in the standalone volume. Although this might be true, if we look at the part we highlighted, we see that it doesn't really strengthen that claim directly. So we're going to strike through that one. Next, we're going to look at B, and it says that many critics believe that the poet's explanatory notes remove certain ambiguities of the poem and make it less interesting as a result. Although this does tell us something about the poet's explanatory notes, it doesn't strengthen the idea that the explanatory notes were given to help market the standalone volume. So we can strike through that one too. Next, we're going to look at C, and it says that the publishers of the standalone volume requested the explanatory notes from the poet in order to make the book attractive to readers who already had a copy of the poem in a journal issue. Well, what this tells us in this option is that the publishers requested the explanatory notes as a way to market and the standalone volume and have it reach a certain type of audience, which goes directly with what we highlighted. So we're going to keep C. And finally, we can go to option D, where it says correspondence between the poet and the publisher reveals that the poet's explanatory notes went through several drafts. This is completely useless and doesn't help strengthen or weaken. It's completely unrelated to the part we highlighted, so we can strike through that and conclude that the answer is C.
Okay, so the next tip we have for you guys is to use Desmos to check your work. So let's take a look at a question where we can do that. So in this question, we're given x minus 1 squared equals negative 4 and asked how many distinct real solutions does the given equation have. So if we had taken a quick look at this question, we would realize that no matter what x minus 1 is, if we square any number, it has to be 0 or greater, because a positive times a positive will be positive and a negative times a negative will also be positive. So we would have said to ourselves, there could never be a solution because the number will never be negative, which means it can never be negative 4. So once we say that, we could say, okay, let me go into Desmos and check if this is correct. So what we can do is we can plug in y equals x minus 1 squared, and then also plug in y equals negative 4. And because these lines never touch, we can conclude that our answer is right and we will have 0 solutions.
The next tip for the math section that we have for you is to use Desmos for system of equations. So let's say we have a question like this, where it tells you that 3x plus 4y equals negative 23 and 2y minus x equals negative 19. And all you need to do is find the solution as a coordinate pair of x comma y. Well, although you can solve this by doing elimination or substitution or any of these methods, that's going to take a lot more work than is actually needed, where instead you could just use Desmos. So here we're going to show you what you can do with Desmos. So if you plug both equations into Desmos, 3x plus 4y equals negative 23 and 2y minus x equals negative 19, you can actually look at where these two lines intersect. Where they intersect is a point x comma y that satisfies both of the needs of the equation. After you find this point, you just look deeper into it, find the exact coordinates of it, which are 3 comma negative 8, and then you see which answer goes with it, which is answer B.
Okay, so our next tip is the number of unknowns is equal to the number of equations you need to solve a question. So what this means is if we take, for example, a question like x plus 4 equals 10. Well, we know that we can just solve this. Why is that? Well, because x is our only unknown. So since we only have one unknown, we only need one equation. We could plug this straight into Desmos and see that x would equal 6. But what happens when we're given an equation like x plus 4y equals 10? So here all I've done is I've added a y to the 4. And now as you can see, there's a ton of different solutions that I could have. For example, my x could equal 0 and my y could equal 10 over 4. Or my x could equal 2 and my y could equal 2. Those are just two of the infinite solutions that we could have to this equation. So what needs to happen is we would need a second equation to find x and y. So what we can do is we can utilize this for questions where we're only given one equation, and we could realize that for these questions, for example, this one, we cannot actually solve for g and r. So what we would do is we would make sure to solve this question by just analyzing the function. Now, we're not going to solve this question in this video, but if you want to see how to solve this question, make sure to check the video that is linked above. Before we get into this next question, 93% of our viewers are not subscribed to the channel. Make sure that if you guys enjoy our content, you like and subscribe to the channel. It helps support us and we can help bring more content to you guys.
All right, the next tip we have for you guys is just to notice that the first 5 questions in our math module are going to be easy and the last 5 are going to generally be hard. Now this can just be used to check yourself as you're going through the module. For example, in the beginning you might find a question like this. Now this question is extremely easy, right? If you find it hard, you know that you're probably doing something wrong because it's in the beginning of the module and those questions are generally easier. At the end of the module, you might encounter something like this. Now, although we won't solve this problem now because we have a video solving hard math SAT problems that you guys should go check out, if you're having an easy time solving this problem, easier than what you did earlier, then you know you might be going in the wrong direction since it's one of the last problems in a module and is generally supposed to be harder.
So our next tip is to use all the information given. So on the SAT Math, all the information you are given is given to you for a reason. So what we want you to do is we want you to find ways to use what they've given you to solve the question. So what we're going to do is let's take a look at a question where we can do that. So in this question, we're given x minus 29 equals x minus a times x minus 29, and we're asked which of the following are solutions to the given equation where a is a constant and a is greater than 30. So let's recall that the solutions are the x values where the left side will equal the right side. So what we can do is if we look at case 1, we would have that x equals a. So we can write this as a minus 29 equals a minus a times a minus 29. So we can say that a minus 29 equals 0 times a minus 29 since a minus a is 0. So we would get that a minus 29 equals 0 and therefore a would equal 29. We know that this would not work because a has to be greater than 30. That would make this impossible. So if we look, answer A, B, and D all include case 1 as a correct solution. So we can say that A, B, and D are all wrong and therefore the correct answer would have to be C.
Alright, our next tip for you guys is going to be for questions with conversion factors in the math section. Now sometimes these questions may ask you to convert between things like feet squared and inches squared that'll throw you off. For example, when asked to convert between feet squared to inches squared, you might think 1 to 12 immediately and that 1 foot squared is equal to 12 inches squared. But these are actually not two equal things, so you can't go about it like that. Instead, go about the most simple way and convert it to the units that you need to get it to. So you could think to yourself something that you know for sure, which is that 1 foot equals 12 inches. In order to get into feet squared and inches squared, go from that basic conversion factor and square both sides in order to get it to feet squared and inches squared. After squaring both sides, you're going to get 1 foot squared equals 144 inches squared, since 12 squared is 144. Now you got the correct conversion factors from a basic thing that you know is true instead of making an incorrect assumption.
All right, so our next tip is that R and W equals X and Y. So what you're going to be given on the SAT math section is you're going to be given equations where you are given a lot of variables that you do not know. So we're given here that 6 plus 7R equals PW and 7R minus 5W equals 5W plus 11. And we're asked in the given system of equations, P is a constant. If the system has no solutions, what is the value of P? So a lot of people might get confused here because there's so many variables that are not X and Y, and so we don't even know where to start. Well, what we can do is we can just say that R equals X and Y equals W. And then what we can do is we can just convert our equation from 6 plus 7R equals PW and 7R minus 5W equals 5W plus 11 into 6 plus 7X equals PY and 7X minus 5Y equals 5Y plus 11. Then we can solve using what we know about linear equations, and we would find that P equals 10. Now, keep in mind, this does not only work for R and W, it works for any variables that are not X and Y. You can just call one of them X and the other one Y.
Our last tip for you guys is going to be to use U substitution or any type of substitution for a question like this one, where you're not asked to solve for X, but you're asked to solve for a quantity like 4 minus 3X. Here we have that if 9 times 4 minus 3X plus 2 equals 8 times 4 minus 3x plus 18. What is the value of 4 minus 3x? Well, here we could just say that u equals 4 minus 3x and then plug that in to solve it. If we say that, we can do that 9u plus 2 equals 8u plus 18, plugging in u for wherever it is 4 minus 3x, and then we can rearrange that equation for u equals 16. Doing that, we can get the answer of D and get the value of 4 minus 3x as 16 without ever directly finding the value of x. This can be used to solve harder questions like the one below, which we covered in our 20 Math Hard SAT questions video.
So hopefully now you guys are feeling more confident for your SAT in the coming weeks or months. We hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you like and subscribe, and make sure to follow Teen Tutors on every social media platform, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Make sure that you guys study hard for the SAT. We are here to help you guys and make sure that you guys have the best SAT studying experience possible. So make sure that if you enjoyed the video, you stick around and watch a couple more.